The rain had been falling for 3 days straight when the Grayson family arrived at 28 Blackthorn Lane, Croydon. The house stood alone at the far end of the road, an ancient Victorian structure with ivy crawling up its cracked walls, the windows like dark, watching eyes. Inside the moving truck, their laughter was light and hopeful, but the air around the house felt wrong to quiet, as if the world itself was holding its breath. When they stepped out, the youngest daughter, Emily, froze. She clutched her mother's hand and whispered, "Mom, who's that woman in the window?" But there was no one there. That first night, the wind howled through the chimney like a voice crying for help. The lights flickered even though the power was steady. The father, Richard Grayson, blamed the storm, while his wife Clara tried to settle the kids upstairs. Yet every room had its own strange odor, like old blood and damp soil. At 2:17 a.m., Clara woke to the sound of footsteps coming from the hallway. Slow, heavy, wet. She thought it was Richard checking the doors, but when she turned, she saw him still sleeping beside her. The footsteps stopped outside their bedroom door. A pause, then a soft knock. 3 times. Knock, knock, knock. She opened the door quickly. No one. Just a faint, cold mist rolling along the wooden floorboards. From the children's room came a muffled sound, a giggle, followed by a whisper. When Clara rushed in, Emily was sitting up, her eyes wide open, staring at the corner of the room. "She said she lives here," Emily murmured, pointing toward the shadowed wall. "She said you shouldn't have moved in." The air grew colder. The night seemed to hum with static, and Clara could feel her breath turning to vapor. She pulled her daughter close, whispering for her to go back to sleep. But when Clara turned off the light, she noticed something carved faintly into the wall beneath the peeling wallpaper, written in jagged letters. "Get out." The next morning, Richard insisted it must be vandalism. He painted over the writing and laughed it off. But by evening, the words were back, darker, deeper, as if the wall itself was bleeding them out. That night, Emily refused to sleep in her room. She said the woman kept whispering her name from the wardrobe. Richard checked it himself. Nothing inside. But as he closed the wardrobe door, he caught a glimpse, just for a second, of a reflection that wasn't his own. On the third night, the house groaned like a living thing. Pipes clanged, walls shuddered, and somewhere deep below in the basement, something began scratching. Slowly, rhythmically, as though it was digging its way out. By dawn, Clara couldn't take it anymore. She called the local parish priest, who told her quietly over the phone, "Mrs. Grayson, that house has been empty for 40 years. The last family that lived there, none of them survived the winter." That same day, a letter arrived. No return address. Just 5 words scrawled in black ink. "Do not stay another night." But it was already too late, because as night fell, the whispering began again. Not from one corner, but from every wall, every room, every mirror. And in the dark reflection of the hallway mirror, Clara saw them, a dozen pale faces watching her, their mouths moving soundlessly in unison, mouthing one chilling phrase, "Welcome home." By the 5th night, 28, Blackthorn Lane had stopped pretending to be a house. It breathed, it listened, it waited. The Graysons moved through it like strangers trespassing in a tomb. Every door creaked in warning. Every mirror seemed to turn its reflection a half-second too slow. Even the air carried a weight, thick, damp, and faintly metallic, as though something had been bleeding for a very long time. On Monday morning, Richard tried to convince himself that everything could be explained. He told Clara that the scratching was probably rats, that the whispers were just pipes. But when he went down to the basement to check, he found no pipes, no wires, just rotting earth and a single, old rocking chair, swaying gently as if someone had just stood up from it. A child's music box rested on the chair. It began to play by itself, a cracked lullaby drifting through the darkness. And in the space between the notes, something whispered, "Still here." Richard stumbled backward, nearly tripping over a pile of old boards. As his flashlight flickered, he saw writing scratched deep into the basement wall, hundreds of names carved over each other, layer upon layer, all ending with the same final word, "Mine." Upstairs, Clara was trying to pack a few things, planning to take the children to her sister's. But when she opened her wardrobe, she froze. Every piece of clothing she owned had been hung inside out, and the mirror on the wardrobe door had cracks shaped like claw marks. From behind her, the faintest whisper, "You can't leave." The air turned heavy. Clara's breath clouded in front of her face as the temperature plummeted. Then the wardrobe door slammed shut with such force that the glass shattered, shards flying across the room. Emily screamed from the hallway, "Mom, it's in my room again." When Clara ran into Emily's room, the sight stopped her heart. Every doll on the shelf had been decapitated, their heads arranged in a perfect circle around Emily's bed. In the center of the circle, carved into the wooden floor, was a symbol burned deep, still smoking. Emily sat on the bed, trembling, whispering. She said she's not alone anymore. Clara pulled her daughter close and turned toward the window. Outside, a figure stood in the garden, a woman in a long black dress, head bowed, her hands clasped as if in prayer. When Clara blinked, she was gone. But muddy footprints began to appear across the carpet, walking slowly toward them, one by one, leading to the side of the bed. That night, Richard decided to stay awake. He sat downstairs with the shotgun across his lap, lights on, waiting for whatever was tormenting them. At exactly 3:03 a.m., every light in the house went out. The silence was thick, like cotton over his ears. Then, from the hallway above, he heard the sound of a woman humming the same lullaby from the music box. He climbed the stairs, calling out, "Clara? Emily?" The humming stopped, and then the bathroom door opened slowly by itself. He raised the flashlight. The walls were dripping wet, though the taps were dry. A figure stood inside the bathtub, her back turned. "Who are you?" he whispered. The figure turned. A woman's face, pale and rotted, eyes black and weeping tar. Her mouth opened wider than humanly possible, releasing a shriek that rattled the windows. Richard fired. The sound exploded through the house, but when the smoke cleared, the bathtub was empty. Only a puddle of filthy water remained. And written in the condensation on the mirror, "It's my house now." The next morning, they tried to leave, but every time Richard turned the key in the ignition, the car died. The house loomed behind them, silent, waiting. By nightfall, the children wouldn't stop crying. Clara clutched the phone, shaking, whispering to herself, "We need help. We need someone. Anyone." Finally, she dialed the number of a local priest, who listened for a long time before saying, quietly, "Mrs. Grayson, that house was once investigated by a pair of demonologists from America. Their names were Ed and Lorraine Warren." Clara's hand trembled. "Can you reach them?" The priest paused. "If they answer, pray they come quickly." Outside, as thunder rolled over Croydon, the lights in the house flickered one last time. In the reflection of the living room window, a dozen shadowy figures stood behind the family, still, silent, watching. And somewhere deep beneath the floorboards, the music box began to play again. Ting, 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 ting. Still here, the Graysons had not slept for 3 days when the Warrens arrived. It was a gray October morning in Croydon, the air thick with the smell of rain, and something fouler, something like decay beneath the soil. Ed Warren stepped out of the car first, coat collar turned up against the wind. He looked at the house in silence for a long time, eyes narrowing. The front windows reflected no light. The curtains inside were drawn tight, though Clara swore she hadn't closed them. Lorraine Warren, standing beside him, clutched the crucifix around her neck. Her breath came out shallow, her face pale. "It's waiting," she said quietly. "It knows we're here." Inside, the smell of rot was worse. Mildew clung to the wallpaper, and the hallway floorboards groaned as if shifting beneath unseen weight. The family gathered in the living room, their faces hollow, dark from sleeplessness. Emily wouldn't let go of her mother's hand. Ed began setting up his equipment, an analog recorder, an amp meter, and a temperature gauge. He placed a small crucifix on the mantelpiece. The moment it touched the wood, a deep crack split across the wall, dust falling like ash. "That's not a good sign," Ed muttered. Lorraine closed her eyes. She whispered a prayer, then lifted her head slightly, as if listening to something beyond human hearing. "There are more than one," she murmured. "Not spirits, fragments. Something broke them here. Something used them." Ed and Lorraine began their walkthrough. The basement door stood open, though no one remembered opening it. The smell hit them first, a stench of burnt meat and damp stone. Their flashlight beams cut through the black, illuminating the rocking chair. It was moving again, slowly, as if unseen hands pushed it. Lorraine stepped closer. This is where it started. She knelt beside the chair and touched the floor. Her fingers came back, blackened, covered in soot and something sticky. Suddenly, her body stiffened. Her eyes rolled white. Her voice, when she spoke, was not her own. Deep, rasping, ancient. I was buried here. They took my children. I made them stay. Ed caught her shoulders, shaking her back to herself. Lorraine gasped, trembling violently. It's not just haunting this place, she whispered. It's feeding from it. They moved upstairs. The walls seemed to hum with a low vibration, like something alive within them. On Emily's door, someone had painted a symbol in dried blood, a crooked circle intersected by nails. Ed lifted his flashlight. That's not any church mark I know, he said. Lorraine shuddered. It's not from any church, she said. It's a binding seal used in 19th century occult rituals. Someone tried to keep something in, not out. As if on cue, the temperature dropped. Frost spread across the mirror. The crucifix on Lorraine's neck twisted violently. The chain snapping, it fell to the floor and slid several inches on its own. A woman's scream erupted from inside the mirror. For a second, a pale figure appeared within the glass, eyes hollow, mouth stretched open in a silent cry. Then it shattered, sending shards flying through the room. Emily began to scream. Something invisible was pulling at her hair, dragging her toward the corner. Ed lunged forward, grabbing her arms, pulling her back with all his strength. The air howled around them, voices overlapping, male and female, young and old, all chanting the same word. Stay. Lorraine raised her hand, shouting a prayer in Latin. A blinding white light burst from the crucifix in her palm, and for a moment, the house fell silent, utterly, unnaturally silent. Then, somewhere deep in the walls, something knocked back. 3 times. Knock, knock, knock. The entire house trembled. After the chaos settled, Ed pulled Lorraine aside. She looked pale, sick, and shaken. What did you see? He asked softly. She hesitated. Not one entity, she said, voice trembling. Dozens bound here by one master spirit. A woman who died over 100 years ago. A mother who murdered her own children, then cursed the house to keep their souls with her forever. Ed's jaw tightened. And she's trying to do it again. Lorraine nodded slowly, tears in her eyes. Yes, Emily is the replacement. That night, the Warrens set up cameras and recording devices throughout the house. They planned to capture proof of what they believed was a Class 7 demonic attachment, a powerful entity that could mimic voices and manifest physically. At 3:15 a.m., the recordings began. On the first tape, a whisper, "Do not take her away." On the second, a child's giggle. And on the third, Ed's own voice. Though he hadn't spoken, "You'll never leave." He played it back 3 times. Each playback grew louder. By the fourth, the whisper was no longer a whisper, it was a scream. Lorraine clutched her rosary, her voice shaking. "Ed, we need to stop this. It doesn't want to be exorcised. It wants us here. It wants me." The lights began to flicker, the air filled with the scent of sulfur. Then, from the basement, the rocking chair began to move again. Faster this time, creaking violently. The last line of the night came from Lorraine, her voice breaking into a whisper. "It's waking up." The night after the first recordings, Ed and Lorraine barely spoke. The house had grown quieter, unnaturally quiet, as though it was listening. The rain outside had stopped, but inside, the walls seemed to drip with unseen moisture. Every footstep echoed too long. Every whisper came from the wrong direction. Lorraine awoke just before dawn, her body freezing cold. She had dreamed of water black, stagnant water, and of children's faces floating beneath it, their eyes open, mouths gasping silently. When she opened her eyes, the sound of dripping continued, steady and slow. She looked up. From the ceiling above her bed, dark water was seeping through, forming a small puddle on the floor. But it wasn't water, it was thick and red. Downstairs, Ed found Richard sitting by the kitchen table, staring blankly at the wall. On the surface of the wall, someone had drawn a woman's face, crude, childlike, using blood. Richard's voice was hollow. She said she used to live here. She said we're living in her grave. Ed's hands trembled as he pulled out his notepad. Describe her. Richard's eyes darted around the room. Pale, hair to her waist, always wet. When she smiles, it's wrong. Like her mouth keeps going. Lorraine entered the kitchen, her cross clutched tightly. Her eyes were distant. Her name was Margaret Holloway. Everyone turned to her. Lorraine's voice had changed deeper, almost detached, as if she were half inside another world. She lived here in 1886. Her husband died in the coal mines. She lost her mind after their youngest drowned in the well behind the house. The neighbors heard her singing to the bodies before she buried them in the cellar. When the police came, they said she was still smiling. Clara gasped, covering Emily's ears. That can't be true. Lorraine's gaze fixed on the ceiling. They hanged her at the gallows outside Croydon prison, but before she died, she swore no mother would ever leave this house without losing what she lost. The crucifix around Lorraine's neck snapped in two. The pieces fell to the table, hot, burning against the wood. That evening, the Warrens decided to investigate the cellar, the same place where Lorraine had first heard the voices. The basement was colder than before, their breaths visible in the beam of the flashlight. A faint humming filled the space, a woman's voice, soft and cracked, singing a lullaby. Hush now, little one. Close your eyes. The dark will keep you safe. Lorraine's knees buckled. She clutched her head. She's here, she whispered. She's right here. The rocking chair began to move again. Only this time, there was someone sitting in it. A woman in a soaked black dress, her hair covering her face, her hands folded in her lap. Her chest rose and fell, though no air escaped her lips. Lorraine stepped forward, trembling. Margaret Holloway? The figure lifted her head slowly. Her skin was gray, her lips purple and cracked. When she spoke, her voice came from everywhere. The walls, the floor, the ceiling. She's mine now. The temperature dropped sharply. Frost spread across the basement walls. The flashlight burst in Ed's hand, plunging them into darkness. Then came the sound of wet dragging from behind them. When Ed turned, he saw footprints forming in the dirt, small, child-sized, leading toward the chair. Mommy, a voice whispered. It's so cold down here. Clara screamed, rushing down the stairs, but something invisible struck her across the face, throwing her backward into the wall. Blood ran down her cheek as she gasped for air. Lorraine shouted a prayer, but her words twisted, echoing back to her in a mocking tone. The voice that answered was not human anymore. You cannot cast me out. I am not a spirit. I am what's left when God forgets. Suddenly, the rocking chair began to spin violently, knocking over the music box. As it hit the ground, the lullaby warped, slowing down, melting into a low growl. The room shook. A force pressed on their chests, making it hard to breathe. Ed pulled Lorraine away, yelling, out of the basement. But before they reached the stairs, the door slammed shut. Nails began to force themselves out of the wood, flying across the room. Lorraine screamed as one grazed her shoulder, drawing blood. Then the entity spoke through her. Her voice deepened, eyes rolling back white. You can't save her, Ed. You never save them. They all stay with me. Ed wrapped his arms around her, praying in Latin through gritted teeth. The house roared in fury, the sound of children crying, laughing, screaming all at once. Then silence. Lorraine collapsed in his arms, gasping for breath. When the lights flickered back, the chair was still. The walls were covered in handprints, hundreds of them, tiny, smeared in ash and blood. At the center of the floor, a new symbol had appeared, a circle of ash with Emily's name written inside it. Later that night, Lorraine regained consciousness. Her first words were faint, but Ed heard them clearly. It's not a haunting anymore, Ed. It's a claim. From Ed. Warren's field report, 1970 for transcript excerpt. This is no residual haunting. This entity exhibits control, intelligence, and intent to possess. It mimics affection, disguises sorrow as sympathy, and uses maternal instinct as a weapon. We're not fighting a ghost. We're facing something far older, something that calls itself Mother Holloway. The night after the cellar incident, The Croydon house no longer slept. Every wall creaked as if breathing. Every pipe moaned like something trapped inside. The scent of sulfur and decay filled the air, seeping into the Graysons' clothes, their hair, their skin. Lorraine couldn't shake what she'd seen, those children's hands pressed into the walls, frozen in eternal pleading. But it wasn't pity the entity wanted. It was ownership. And now, it had chosen its vessel. 102 audio tape number 17, filed by Ed Warren. Sound of faint cry. Ed. Lorraine. She's sleepwalking again. Lorraine. No. She's being led. Pause. A soft female hum echoes in background. Ed. That song again. The lullaby. Lorraine. It's not coming from her. When they entered Emily's room, the girl was standing in the middle of the floor, her back to them. The temperature dropped instantly. Her nightgown clung to her skin, soaked as if she'd been standing in rain, but the windows were shut tight. On the walls, every picture had been turned upside down. Ed called softly, "Emily?" She turned slowly, unnaturally. Her pupils were dilated, her lips trembling as if whispering to someone they couldn't see. "She says you can't help me." Her voice was not her own. It was layered, a child's tone beneath something deep and ancient. Then she screamed. The crucifix above her bed burst into flames. For the next 3 hours, the house descended into chaos. Furniture slid across the floor by itself. The mirrors bled dark streaks of liquid. Every clock in the house stopped at 3:15 a.m. Clara clutched her daughter, sobbing, while Ed recited prayers from the Roman ritual. Lorraine pressed her rosary against Emily's forehead, chanting Latin through tears. "In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit." Emily convulsed violently, her body bent backward, spine cracking audibly. A guttural laugh erupted from her throat, a voice that didn't belong in a human mouth. "Do you think your God remembers this place?" it hissed. He turned away when she begged. "He left us here." The wind howled through the chimney like a scream. Books flew from the shelves. The floorboards rippled under their feet, as though the house itself were alive and writhing. Lorraine felt something cold wrap around her ankle. When she looked down, a pale child's hand was gripping her, emerging from the wooden floor. Dozens more followed, tiny, gray fingers clawing through the cracks, reaching for her. She screamed, tearing herself free, blood streaking her leg where the hands had grazed her skin. Ed grabbed the crucifix from the table and held it high. "In the name of Christ, I command you." The lights exploded. Every bulb burst, showering glass like rain. Emily collapsed. Her breathing slowed. Then, from the darkness, a voice spoke calmly and wrong. "You cannot command me in my own house." The shadows in the room twisted, taking form. A woman stood behind Emily, her black dress dripping wet, hair plastered across her face. Her hands rested gently on Emily's shoulders. Lorraine could barely breathe. "Margaret," she whispered. "Why her?" The entity tilted its head. Beneath the veil of hair, her eyes gleamed like empty sockets filled with oil. "Because she still loves her mother." Suddenly, Emily's body was flung across the room. She hit the wall with inhuman force, but did not fall. She hovered, suspended mid-air, eyes rolling back. "White." A guttural voice echoed through her small mouth, half scream, half growl. "Let me in." Ed held his crucifix tighter. "She's fighting it, Lorraine. She's still in there." Lorraine fell to her knees, whispering desperate prayers. The walls vibrated, the windows shattered outward, and a violent gust of wind tore through the house. Every candle blew out, except one. That single flame burned before Emily, its light flickering across her face. She stopped screaming. Her body went limp, floating downward until her feet touched the floor. Then she looked up. "She's gone," she said softly. Ed sighed in relief. "Emily, are you?" She smiled, a slow, unnatural smile that stretched too wide. "She said she'd let me borrow her." Her voice was two voices at once. For the next 2 days, Emily was no longer Emily. She spoke to unseen people, answered questions no one had asked. She sat for hours in silence, humming that cursed lullaby. Sometimes she would whisper to the empty rocking chair, saying, "Who says you'll stay forever?" Ed and Lorraine documented everything, trying to plan an exorcism, but every priest they called refused to come. One of them, Father Dyer said in a shaking voice. That house doesn't need an exorcism. It needs a burial. That night, Ed and Lorraine heard the basement door creak open on its own. Footsteps. Slow, heavy, wet. Then, from the darkness below, Emily's voice floated up the stairs. She wants you to see where we sleep. Lorraine rushed down first, flashlight trembling in her hand. At the bottom of the stairs, the air was freezing, her breath visible, her heart pounding, and then she saw them. Small forms, 3 child-sized shapes standing motionless in the corner. Their eyes open, faces gray. They looked at her as one, mouths moving together. Stay with us, Miss Lorraine. The flashlight flickered. When it came back on, they were gone. Only the sound of water dripping remained, and the faint echo of a lullaby that seemed to come from inside the walls. Ed found Lorraine upstairs, shivering uncontrollably. She clutched her rosary so tightly her palms bled. It's not possessing her, she whispered. It's merging with her. Excerpt from Ed. Warren's journal, October 14, 1974. The entity has crossed into full manifestation. It no longer hides behind fear, it uses it. The child's innocence has been consumed, turned into a mirror for the thing's grief and rage. This is no ordinary haunting. This is a resurrection through the living. That night, as Ed finished writing, he heard something on the tape recorder still running from earlier. A faint voice, Emily's voice. Mr. Warren, she says thank you. Then a pause, and in a deeper voice, echoing beneath hers, for letting us in. The exorcism began at 11:45 p.m. under the pale, bruised moon. Rain lashed against the broken windows of Croydon House. Lightning crawled across the sky like veins, white and violent. Inside, every candle in the living room flickered in defiance of a wind that seemed to breathe. Ed Warren stood near the center, the crucifix in one hand, a vial of holy water in the other. Lorraine stood behind him, clutching her rosary until her knuckles turned white. Emily Grayson sat bound to the wooden chair. Her wrists were bruised, her eyes hollow. The ropes weren't for her protection, they were for theirs. For hours, the Warrens had prepared. The Bible open on the table, Latin chants echoing under their breath. They had sealed every door with salt, every mirror covered with white cloth. But still, the house whispered, faint voices of children giggling, crying, calling names that didn't belong to anyone alive. Mommy, help me, we're cold. Lorraine closed her eyes and whispered, they're not children anymore. Then came the voice from Emily, soft at first, like the tone of a mother telling bedtime stories. She never wanted to hurt them, you know. Her head tilted sideways, and her lips curved into that same too wide smile, but they wouldn't stop crying in the dark. Her voice deepened, a second, rasping tone layered beneath. So she gave them silence. The room dropped below freezing. Frost crawled up the windows. The air shimmered, and a rancid odor like burning hair and rotting milk filled the space. Ed began the ritual of deliverance. His voice trembled, but didn't break. In the name of Jesus Christ, I command, in clean spirit. Before he could finish, the house itself roared. Every door slammed shut at once. Books hurled themselves from shelves. The floorboards buckled upward as if something underneath was pushing through. Emily screamed, or perhaps the thing inside her did. The sound was inhuman, shrill enough to rattle the glass. Her body convulsed violently, and the chair lifted several inches from the ground. Stop this, Ed, Lorraine cried. She's going to break. That's not her anymore, he shouted back. Lightning struck the roof. The lights went out completely. Only the candle flames remained. But now, they burned black. From the darkness behind Emily, a shape unfolded. Tall, thin, dressed in black rags, dripping with wet soil. The shape leaned close to Emily's ear, whispering in a voice like knives scraping glass. They took my children. I will take hers. Ed splashed the holy water. It hissed like acid when it touched the air. The entity screeched, its face flickering between Margaret Holloway, the grieving mother who once lived there, and something grotesque, eyeless, jaw unhinged. Margaret Holloway, Lorraine pleaded. You lost them in the fire. But this is not them. You're keeping them here. The entity's neck snapped sideways with the cracking sound. When it spoke again, the voice was not Margaret's. I am the fire. The walls began to pulse. Every nailed cross turned upside down. Blood seeped from the cracks between the floorboards, forming words in Latin. Veni ad domum meum, come to my home. Emily's head jerked upward. Her eyes glowed white. Her mouth opened wider still until her jaw cracked audibly, and a stream of dark smoke poured out, twisting upward into a human shape. Lorraine fell to her knees, screaming, "Ed, it's separating. Keep praying." Ed's voice grew louder, desperate. "By the power of the Holy Spirit, I cast you out, spirit of deceit." The black smoke lunged at him, knocking him to the floor. He felt fingers wrap around his throat, but when he looked, nothing was there. He gasped, clawing at invisible hands, while Lorraine rushed to his side. The crucifix burned hot in his palm, glowing red. And then silence. Everything stopped. The candles blew out. The air went still. For a moment, it seemed over, until Emily began to laugh. "You think you can cast out what was invited in," she said softly. "She's part of me now. Mother made sure of that." Lorraine's tears streamed down her face. "Emily, fight her. Please, sweetheart. She's lying to you." Emily's expression softened. For a brief moment, her eyes flickered blue again. Her real eyes. "She's hurting. She wants to be free." And then, before Ed could react, Emily twisted the ropes from her wrists and drove one jagged splinter into her own arm. Blood spilled over the floorboards and the entire house screamed. The sound was so loud it shattered the remaining glass in the windows. Lorraine clutched her head. The walls were shaking violently now, dust falling from the ceiling like ash. Through the chaos, Ed reached for Emily, pressing the crucifix against her chest. "If you can hear me, Emily, repeat after me. Say it." Her lips trembled. "Then, deliver us." The black smoke shrieked. The shape behind her began to dissolve. For the first time, the shadows fled. It was over by dawn. The house was silent. No whispers, no cold air, just stillness, and the faint scent of burned wood. Emily was unconscious, but alive. Lorraine sat beside her, shaking, while Ed packed their things. But just before they left, Lorraine turned toward the staircase and froze. There, at the top of the stairs, stood three small figures. The children. Their faces were calm. Their eyes glowed faintly. One of them whispered, "She's gone now." And then, in perfect unison, "But she left the door open." The Croydon lot had been empty for over a decade. No one built there. No one even mowed the wild grass that had swallowed the ground. Locals whispered that the land was cursed, that it ate whatever touched it. But to Michael Graves, a 37-year-old paranormal researcher with a reputation for chasing forbidden places, it was just a field with a story, a legend he wanted to debunk. He arrived on October 31 Street, 1986, carrying a tape recorder, a new infrared camera, and the original Warren case notes he'd purchased at an estate auction. The tape on top was labeled, in Ed's handwriting, "Croydon House Final Manifestation. Do not return." Michael smiled grimly. "Challenge accepted," he muttered. As he stepped onto the property, the world seemed to change. The night grew heavier, thicker. Sound itself seemed muffled. Even the crickets went silent. He set up his equipment near what used to be the foundation. A soft hum vibrated through the ground. It felt faint at first, like electricity beneath the soil. Then came the smell, damp wood, and something else. Rot. Michael turned on his recorder. 11:32 p.m. No structure remains. Ground unstable. Detecting high EMF activity despite no power sources nearby. Static hissed from the speaker, followed by a whisper, "You shouldn't have come back." He froze. He hadn't said that. The voice was a woman's, brittle and distant, as though spoken through a throat full of dirt. He swept the field with his flashlight. Nothing. Just weeds and the dark outlines of broken stone. Then he noticed something strange. The grass near the center was pressed flat in a perfect circle. Inside it, the soil was black, as if scorched. Michael crouched and touched the ground. It was warm. The recorder clicked again on its own. "The door is still open." He looked around wildly. "Who's there?" The wind didn't answer, but the earth did. The soil began to tremble, pulsing under his hand. and a faint humming rose up from below. A lullaby. "Hush now, little one." His blood ran cold. That was the same lullaby from the Warrens' notes. The one Margaret Holloway sang before she died. Michael grabbed his flashlight and began to back away, but his foot caught on something buried in the dirt. A wooden board. He brushed off the soil, revealing a section of the old cellar floor, the one Ed and Lorraine had stood on 12 years ago. The wood creaked beneath his touch, and for a brief second, he thought he heard breathing from underneath. "Is someone down there?" he whispered. A pause, then a voice, small and fragile, a child's. "Help us." Mommy locked the door. Michael stumbled back. His flashlight flickered violently before dying completely. Darkness swallowed the field, and from it came a new sound. Slow, deliberate footsteps. Not from in front of him, from below him. The soil split open. A crack tore through the earth, releasing a stench of decay. Out of the fissure crawled hands, dozens of them, gray, wet, twitching. They clawed upward, blind, reaching for him. Michael screamed, stumbling backward, tripping over his own gear. He scrambled to his feet, running toward the road. But the path was gone. The field had changed. Where there had been open space, now there were walls. Rotten walls. The Croydon house had returned. Its silhouette rose from the soil like a corpse rising from its grave. Windows glowing faintly. The door hanging open. A single sound echoed from inside. The creak of a rocking chair. Michael, shaking, held up his recorder. "This isn't possible. The house is back." His words cut off as the door slowly swung wider. A woman's figure stood in the threshold, soaked, hair hanging over her face. "Margaret Holloway. He promised they wouldn't rebuild," she whispered. "He lied." The walls around him pulsed like flesh. Shadows crawled along the floor, forming the outlines of children, dozens of them each whispering in overlapping voices. "Stay with us. Don't leave. We're lonely down here." Michael stumbled back, clutching his cross. "In the name of God, I command you," the woman screamed, not in pain, in rage. The air exploded, shattering every window in a burst of glass and bone dust. Her voice echoed from all directions. "You cannot close a door that was never yours to open." The ground split again, this time beneath Michael's feet. He fell, plunging into the dark cellar below, into freezing black water. His recorder hit the floor with a splash, still running. "Help! Someone!" A hand seized his ankle. He kicked wildly, but another hand joined, then another, dragging him under. As the water filled his lungs, he looked up and saw them, the children, watching from beneath the surface, smiling. And behind them, Margaret Holloway floated, eyes open, mouth moving silently. Her lips formed the words, "Welcome home." The next morning, police found Michael's van parked by the road. His recorder lay on the front seat, still running. The final seconds captured a faint lullaby, and a child's laughter fading into static. The field was empty again. No sign of the house. No sign of Michael Graves. Final entry: Lorraine Warren, recorded 1987. "I told them the Croydon site wasn't haunted. It was hungry. And the thing about hunger is it doesn't end when you walk away. It waits." Epilogue. In 1992, a new family purchased the Croydon lot. They planned to build a home there. Construction was halted within 2 days after the workers discovered 3 small wooden coffins buried in the foundation. Each coffin contained a child's toy, and carved inside every lid, in neat cursive writing, "Mother is waiting." The end. Did you enjoy the story? Let us know in the comments. And if you liked it, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to The Horror Dream. Want more stories like this? Subscribe to The Horror Dream, and we'll bring you more darkness just for you. If you enjoy a little chill down your spine, stick around, like, share, and hit that subscribe button right here on The Horror Dream. Your support keeps us going, so stay with us. Subscribe to The Horror Dream for more spine-tingling tales.